just the right way at the perfect time. Previously, I talked a great deal about trust and about this knowing and about shifting your perceptions out of this idea that somehow you are separate from the divine intelligence that is universal. The obvious thing to remember about a universal intelligence is that if it's universal, it is in all places. Therefore, it is in all that you want and all that you are. And so manifesting is the ability to realign your intention with that divine intelligence and know that it will show up. But one of the things that we have a tendency to do as individuals is to become impatient. Our ego says to us, I want what I want, and I want it now. And we have a tendency to try to tell the universal intelligence, or to tell God, or the metaphor that I used earlier as God is like the ocean and we are like a glass. And so we are really a glass of God, if you will. We are a piece of God. But when you separate yourself, one little drop of water separated from the ocean alone literally can't make anything happen, is very weak and so on. And it is only when you unite yourself with that ocean, when that drop of water becomes united with the ocean, it can do anything. It is part of the universal. When you unite yourself with this divine intelligence instead of separating yourself from it, then you know that this ocean will provide. It will provide for you in precisely the right way that it is supposed to, and in exactly the right time. There's a wonderful poet that I have quoted in this program several times, and I want to quote him again. His name is Rumi. Well, Rumi wrote back in the early part of the 13th century. His poetry is still quoted today, and it's something that I would recommend you look at. Jalaluddin Rumi. And he had a poem that is called The Servant Who Loved His Prayers. And I'd like to share that with you as I talk about this idea of detaching from the outcome and letting go of your need to make something happen as you demand it to happen. It's called The Servant Who Loved His Prayers. At dawn, a certain rich man wanted to go to the steam bath. He woke his servant, Sunquar. Ho, get moving, get the basin and the towels and the clay for washing, and let's go to the bath. Sunquar immediately collected what was needed, and they set out side by side along the road. As they passed the mosque, the call to prayer sounded. Sunquar loved his 5 times prayer. Please, Master, rest on this bench for a while, that I may recite Surah 98, which begins, You who treat your slave with kindness. The Master sat on the bench outside, while Sunquar went in. When prayers were over and the priest and all the worshippers had left, still Sunquar remained inside. The Master waited and waited. Finally he yelled into the mosque, Sunquar, why don't you come out? I can't. This clever one won't let me out. Have a little more patience. I hear you out there. 7 times the Master waited, and then shouted. Sunquar's reply was always the same. Not yet. He won't let me come out yet. But there's no one in there but you. Everyone else has left. Who makes you sit still so long? The one who keeps me in here is the one who keeps you out there. The same who will not let you in will not let me out. The ocean will not allow its fish out of itself, nor does it let land animals in where the subtle and delicate fish move. The land creatures lumber along on the ground. No cleverness can change this. There's only one opener for the lock of these matters. Forget your figuring. Forget yourself. Listen to your friend. When you become totally obedient to that one, you'll be free. Rumi. And this idea of knowing that that divine intelligence will work in exactly the order and the preference and the time that it is supposed to. In the Course in Miracles, there's this often quoted passage that says, infinite patience produces immediate results. And it sounds like it's a contradiction, doesn't it? It sounds like a paradox. If I'm patient, infinitely patient, then I will have to wait a very long time. You know, I talked earlier about these tomato seeds that we used to plant, and how the essence of tomato-ness was in every aspect of that tomato, and yet that very essence was something that isn't in the physical world at all. The cause of tomato, as we discover and we look at those seeds and we look at the dust that's in the seeds, and then we try to find out what's in the dust, and ultimately we find out that there's just an energy in there. There's just a wave. There's something that's invisible to the naked eye. There's something that doesn't even exist in a physical world. There are no particles at all. You see, when you're a child, you think like a child, as it says in Corinthians 13. And I can remember as a child when those tomato shoots surfaced above the ground sometime in June, back there in Mount Clemens, and they would come up about 4 or 5 inches above the ground. I remember one time getting down there and looking at those tomato shoots and trying to hurry them along. And I got down on my knees and I started tugging at them as a little boy, maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I remember Mrs. Scarf saying, no, you can't do that. And I was like trying to hurry it along. And this idea of attempting to hurry along the divine intelligence is something that we do with our egos all the time. Obviously, creation reveals its secrets by and by, as it is supposed to, as it is ordained. And when you get down there and start tugging at those shoots, and I remember pulling at one, and I pulled one just a little bit too hard because they're still not firmly entrenched. They don't have very long roots, tomato plants. You can pull them out with hardly any effort at all. And I pulled one right out into my hand, and that was the end of that tomato. There was no possibility because I was attempting to do something that interferes. This principle of detaching ourselves from outcome, along with having infinite patience, is really essential to your manifestation process. It is inconsistent with what we have a tendency to think is the way things should be working. Because if I do everything that I'm supposed to, if I follow all of these principles, and I set down all of the rules, and I get it all organized, then I expect that I'll have results. That's the time in our lives that I referred to earlier in the very first principle of being the warrior, going from the athlete to the warrior. That's the time in our lives when we set our goals. And there's nothing wrong with setting goals. I've written about it and talked about it on many programs right here at Nightingale Conant and in many of my books. But the idea of thinking that setting goals and then just going about and having them show up is still the thinking that keeps us sort of stuck back at the warrior phase of our development. It inhibits us from moving to higher places wherein we can begin to manage the coincidences of our lives, which sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? If it's a coincidence, you can't manage it. If you're managing it, then it's not a coincidence. But when you begin to transcend some of these paradoxes, when you reach a higher level. So setting goals is one thing, and it's something that we do in the earlier stages of our spiritual development. And we continue to do it. And these stages that I talked about earlier are not things that we go into and then never go back to. We go back, we come out of it, we go back. We're always moving in and out of these stages. The question is, what is my primary emphasis? is my primary emphasis not only on setting goals, but in falling in love with those goals, and then insisting that those goals show up when I want them to show up. That is inconsistent with manifestation and with spirituality and higher consciousness. What you have to do is have your goals, which is what a tomato seed is. It's really a goal for tomatoes. But you have to then relax and turn your thoughts and your ideas and your consciousness and your awareness to your own purpose and know in your heart that it will manifest. You see, the key to relaxing about what it is that you would like to see manifested is the certainty of the outcome. If you have a certainty, as it says in the Course in Miracles, if you have a certainty of the outcome, patience is easy. If you are uncertain of the outcome, if you're not sure how it's going to work out, or if things are going to fall into place the way you would like them to, if you have that uncertainty, then you will not be able to be patient. So patience, infinite patience, is really like a trusting in God. And when you trust in God, you're trusting in the wisdom that created you. And when you trust in the wisdom that created you, you're trusting in yourself as well. Because you can never be separate from that wisdom. So patience and trust and awareness and higher consciousness are absolutely essential.
But feeling good is perhaps the most important thing that I can talk to you about here in cleaning up this link. If you open up the Torah, this ancient spiritual text, the Old Testament, and go to the very opening lines, Genesis 1:1, it says, what? In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Pretty simple. God is infinite. Out of this source came all the material worlds. And then if you read down 31 lines later, it says, and all that God created was good. So good and God are synonymous, aren't they? Good and God, just an O, just one extra O. So that when you say, I want to feel good, as you'll see as this program unfolds, you're really saying, in a way, I want to feel God. I want to feel whatever this beautiful source of all, this divine mind, this source of all things, I want to feel what it feels. Now you might say to yourself, yeah, it's easy to say I want to feel good, but how can I feel good when so much around me is bad? How can I feel good if my sister-in-law has cancer? And how can I feel good if I know that over on the other side of this planet there are people who are starving to death? And how can I feel good if there are people who are poor and I have money, and there are people who are starving, and how can I feel good when my children act in the way that they act? Or how can I feel good? And I suggest to you that when you say I want to feel good, what you're saying is I want to feel God. I want to feel this. I want to connect here. And I want to offer this to you as a very important and powerful piece of advice that came to me years ago. You cannot get sick enough to heal one person on this planet. And you cannot get poor enough to make one person wealthy on this planet. And you cannot get confused enough to unconfuse one person on this planet. No amount of your feeling bad, when you say feeling bad, what you do is you lose your connection to Source. And when you lose your connection to Source, what happens is you create something called resistance. I can't do this. It's not possible. I don't deserve it. It's just not something that I can do. And when you create this kind of resistance, you have emotions. And these emotions become sadness, fear, worry, anxiety. And what I'd like to offer you is a way for you to use these emotions that you are experiencing at any time in your life and use them as a system, as a barometer, as a guidance system to say to yourself, what kinds of thoughts am I having that are keeping me from being in rapport with this field of intention. And at any moment that you're not feeling good, you are attracting exactly the opposite of what it is that you would like to attract into your life. You are using this as a way to keep yourself from feeling God or feeling good. If you are listening to the news, and the news is filled with all of the reasons why you should be depressed, and it's not an accident that then they are sponsored by all of the reasons why you should take these narcotics or these pills or whatever it is in order to get over. So here's some depression, and wait a minute, we'll be right back. Here's a way out of it, okay? I saw a commercial the other day. I don't even know what it was for. Some guy gets up in the morning, and he's going out to get clams. And he's going out clamming in the morning, and he's successful at getting the clams. He walks off, and he's got his clams. And I think, and then they say, call your doctor to see if you need some of this clam-finding miracle drug. There's a drug out there that'll help you find clams if this happens to be one of your problems, all right? And there's something out there, and now we're being told to call our doctors. Do I need the orange pill, the green pill, the purple pill? Do I need this one? I saw so-and-so reading it, and she was skating on the ice, and I want to skate on the ice. And it's like it's an endless progression of this. It's one of the reasons that I put so much of my energy into public television. Because when I watch the evening news, when I watch Jim Lehrer on the evening news on PBS, which is the only news that I watch, I don't get bombarded with all of the reasons why, and I also get sort of either side of this thing. I don't just get a one-sided view of, and it's like it's an energy system. I'd like to say to you here that my idea about connecting to intention has certain obstacles to getting there. And I just want to very briefly go through what those obstacles are and then move into what it is that you need to do to understand what this field looks like and what you can do to stay connected to it. Keeping in mind these words, I want to feel good. I know my beautiful daughter, who will be singing in a little while, Sky, she was working on a music project. And she had come to me and she said, she was going to school at the University of Miami. And she said, Dad, would you mind if I dropped out of school? And since I have been a person who has never, ever listened to any advice that adults ever gave me throughout my life about what I should do with my life, because I believe it's something that you have to own yourself, I said, why? And she said, well, I want to sing. I've always just wanted to sing. It's the only thing that's in my heart is singing. And what I've discovered, she said, is that I can't sit in classrooms anymore in my junior year and be told how to sing by people who are not singing. And she said, I also don't want to study theory any longer. I want to sing. I just feel it in my heart. I said, that's great. I said, I'd like to take you with me when I talk all over the country, all over the world. And I'd like you to sing for me, because I'm always so proud to have her on stage with me, as you'll see why shortly. And I said to her, I said, honey, but what you got to do is perhaps put together a project, perhaps put together a CD, get some way that you can come out and sing at the talks and include on this some of the music that is relevant to what I speak about. And she said, okay. And I was over on Maui and I was writing. And she called me, she said, Dad, the problem is that the musicians that I need to be able to do this are not available. And you can't get them. And I said, Sky, you've got to contemplate yourself as surrounded by the conditions which you wish to produce. Don't think about the musicians as not being available. Contemplate yourself surrounded by the musicians, and you'll see that when you reconnect to this source will provide. It always does. It's an unfailing system. It's fail-safe. She said, all right, Dad the dork, you know. She called me back the next day. She said, you're not going to believe this, Dad. I did what you said last night, and all the musicians are available. I just can't believe it. She said, they called the ones that I wanted, especially they had a cancellation on something. She said, the only problem is that the studios that I need in order to be able to record it are unavailable. There's no studios available in any place in South Florida, and I want to get this in, and I had given her a deadline of like 4 days to get this done, an entire CD. So she called me back and she said, how do I get a studio? I said, Sky, contemplate yourself as surrounded by the conditions which you wish to produce. The law of flotation was not discovered. All right, I got it with the flotation, okay? She called me back the next morning. She said, Dad, it's a miracle She said the studios had a cancellation, and the studio that I really need and the musicians, they're all available. I can put the whole thing together. It's so exciting. This stuff really works. I said, of course it does. She said, the only problem is that it costs quite a bit of money to pay these musicians and to have the studio time. I said, Sky, honey, you've got to contemplate yourself as surrounded by the conditions which you want to produce. She said, that's why I'm calling you. And I said, but honey, I want to feel good. She said, maybe you should call Dr. Phil. She said, and this will make you feel good, because you will be contemplating yourself as surrounded by a daughter who is so... She used it all right back on me. And she did it, and she got it done, and she was able to produce it. And, you know, it sounds like a silly little example, but it's like the obstacles that we have to creating what we want very often are in the ways that we perceive ourselves as disconnected here. And every thought that you have that says, I can't do it, is resistance to connecting to Source. And every thought that you have that says, it's never worked before, that's resistance to connecting to this Source, to what is being, what I call vibrating through Source energy, getting back to you, having your desires, what you want to create in vibrational harmony with this highest energy in the universe.